everybody.
Good morning.
Wow, I'm the last speaker. So I'm standing between you and the rest of your weekend. So I better make this good. No pressure there. But good morning. I am so happy to join all of you. I also have my 3 daughters out in the hallway, so if you hear any shrieks or anything like that, that's coming from them. But I wish that I had better news to bring you from Madison and the state legislature. But as anyone who's been following the news, either in newspapers or watching TV or listening to the radio, you all know that good news is in pretty short supply in Madison these days. Throughout this legislative session, we have seen more salvos in the war Governor Walker and his Republican allies have been waging against working people throughout the course of his administration. After spending the entire 2014 election season denying that right to work was a priority for them, calling it a distraction that our state didn't need, right to work suddenly became job one for the Republicans when the legislative session began. Once again, we had major legislation introduced on a Monday, rammed through committee after debate was cut off on a Tuesday, and it was on the Senate floor on a Wednesday. And of course, we know why Republicans had to rush to get it through the legislature before the people of the state even had a chance to read it. It's because if the people of Wisconsin were fully aware of what happens in states that adopt right to work, support for the measure would have been virtually non-existent. The fact is that families in right-to-work states are poorer and less economically secure than those in other states. Poverty rates are higher and infant mortality rates are higher too. One Marquette University economist estimated that right to work will cost the working people of Wisconsin between $3.9 and $4.8 billion in lost income every year. That's just not union members. That's everyone in our state who works for a living. Simply put, right to work doesn't work, and it isn't right for our state. It is, in fact, just one more blow in the Republican war on workers. They refuse to consider raising the minimum wage. They make it harder for people to get unemployment benefits, and they are making every effort to destroy organized labor altogether in Wisconsin. Right to work is just one more demonstration that the Republican Party in our state is dedicated to the politics of destruction, and that Wisconsin's middle class is its #1 target. Once right to work became the law in Wisconsin, the Republicans moved on to their next target, prevailing wage. Yet another tool that helps keep wages competitive, not just for union members or contractors on government projects, but for all workers. But it does so much more than that, as all of you know. It ensures that projects that are being paid for with taxpayer dollars are built by people who actually know what they're doing. The savings that are supposed to come from the elimination of the prevailing wage go right out the window if jobs have to be redone or repaired because of shoddy workmanship. Prevailing wage makes work sites safer by having professionals on the job who understand safety standards and who follow them. And perhaps most of all, prevailing wage protected Wisconsin jobs by discouraging out-of-state firms from undercutting Wisconsin employers. Ending the prevailing wage wasn't ultimately about saving taxpayers money. It was one more blow to the strength of Wisconsin's middle class and the union members who fight to protect it. We see the damage caused by the war on workers all around us. Wisconsin has lagged behind the national average in job creation ever since 2011, when the policies of Governor Walker and the Republican majority in the legislature were first put into place. Wisconsin would have gained nearly 71,000 jobs, more jobs actually, by simply matching the national pace over that time period. And a recent report showed people are slipping from the middle class faster in Wisconsin than in any other state in the nation. The Republican policy of massive tax giveaways to corporations at the expense of investing in strengthening Wisconsin's middle class has led to growing budget deficits and a stagnant economy. Meanwhile, the state agency tasked with promoting job creation has become a dysfunctional mess. Another scathing audit released last spring showed the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, also known as WEDA, was still failing to follow state laws and its own board-approved policies in making awards to businesses. A flurry of investigative reports revealed unvetted loans given to Walker campaign contributors, loans based on fraudulent information, and awards made without formal staff review. And its latest annual report shows that WEDA created 6,000 fewer jobs this year than last year, despite spending $90 million more in awards. So we're getting less for costing taxpayers a lot more. It's little wonder then that Wisconsin is underperforming in job creation when its job agency just continues to lurch from crisis to crisis. How have Governor Walker and the Republicans responded to these failures? By trying to kill the messenger and doing away with the laws and institutions that keep our government honest and our citizens informed. We have seen the push to gut the state's open records law in an effort to hide and keep secret government information from the public in the news media. We've seen an effort to abolish our nonpartisan watchdog agency, the Government Accountability Board, where retired nonpartisan judges enforce our state's ethics and elections laws. We've also seen a push to rewrite the law regarding John Doe investigations just for the political class, making it harder for prosecutors to root out possible corruption in state government. We have also just learned that Governor Walker and Republican legislators want to end the decades-old civil service program that protects state government from cronyism by making sure that only qualified individuals, this is based on their knowledge and competence, are hired for state agency jobs. Republicans want to return to the bad old days of cronyism, when hiring was based on who you know, how much you gave, and who to. And now they are likely to add if you've signed the recall petition or not to that as well. All these maneuvers and law changes create a striking pattern that does not bode well for honest, open government that is free of corruption and cronyism. If all of these proposals are signed into law, it will only make it easier for Republicans to continue the war on workers without any checks or balances. We can't stop speaking out about the war on workers and how Governor Walker and the Republicans have failed the people of Wisconsin. We need to raise our voices louder and to demand change. We need to focus on pro-growth policies that will improve our economy and allow all Wisconsin workers and their families to pursue and achieve the American dream. We need to strengthen our public schools, universities, and technical colleges, and make sure our young people have the education they need to succeed. We need to return to Wisconsin's historic consensus on policies that support labor management cooperation and treat all working people in Wisconsin with dignity and respect. We need to build the kind of economy that will provide rising wages and more economic opportunity for everyone. And we need to protect our government, our democracy, from the corruption and cronyism that threaten it. But however disappointing the news out of Madison has been these days, we can't allow ourselves to lose hope and to give up the fight. Because, as you know, the stakes are just too high. We are fighting for the future of the middle class, and we are fighting for our children and our grandchildren's future. We are fighting for the dream of an America where everyone who works hard and plays by the rules has a chance to succeed. We are fighting for our democracy. Union members have been on the forefront of that fight for generations. We need your leadership and we need your inspiration. We need you to write letters to the editor, talk to your friends, family, and neighbors, contact your legislators, and to stay involved and to fight for your values like you have been doing all along. And we need others in your unions as well as those friends. And most of all, we need you to get out and vote. I promise that I will continue to stand by your side as I have these past years. I know how important unions are because I am the daughter of a retired Teamster member. You provide the backbone of what makes excuse me, the middle class great. And in order for Wisconsin to return to our previous greatness, where everyone in this state, they said, if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. We need to make sure we return to that, because it can't be about who you know, who you contributed to, and how much. We cannot continue to allow Wisconsin to go in that direction. And with working with you and with others, we can get back our state. We can put middle class values back on the forefront and make Wisconsin great again. So thank you so much for your attention this morning, for your invitation to speak to you. And thank you for all that you do to work to promote middle class values and fair treatment in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you. Sure, I am more than happy to take any questions.
I know everybody's anxious to come, but Julie's been around forever.
And obviously I haven't had my second cup of coffee this morning. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, I'm always concerned, and these guys behind me know this, that, Walker is very vindictive.
He is.
You know that very well.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do as Democrats? I mean, you guys pretty much tried everything, but what can you do to start curtailing this madman, this crazy, and his three cronies, Fitzgerald, and that woman, yeah, and she's not a darling. But anyway, what can you do, and what, I know you tell us that we should contact our legislatures, but they turn their phones off. They don't even...
But the thing is that you've contacted them,
right,
and you've let them know where you stand, because that's the only way that you really hold people accountable.
Right.
Because if they don't hear from you, they think, oh, well, I haven't heard from anybody. Really, how bad can this be? People out there must not be concerned about it because I'm not hearing from anyone. And what also is helpful is if you're in my district or you're in another Democrat's district, call them, tell them, I support what you're doing. I'm opposed to what the Republicans are pushing through on some of these changes, and I stand behind you. Because that gives us the ability when we're on the floor of either the Senate or the Assembly to say, I've heard from constituents. They told me this story about how this law change would affect them directly. That gives us the ability to talk about stories. And that's how we get the press to pay attention. And that runs in the newspaper. But it's all about getting our message out, whether it's from people who are in elected office like me. I mean, the Senate Democrats are putting out their middle class, another piece of our middle class agenda in a few weeks. The Assembly Democrats have just done that. We're also going to be doing editorial boards across the state talking about all the bills that I've mentioned about open records, John Doe, getting rid of the independent GAB, stuff like that, because that's all, I mean, it's a pretty telling sign. And the newspaper editorial boards are already starting to talk about that. But it's about getting out their total record and to continue to remind people of that. Because the Republicans are hoping that if they do this far enough in advance from the election, they're counting on people to forget. And if you don't continue to remind them, that's what will happen, is that people will forget. Because if they're not impacted by something, one of these laws directly, they're just busy going on with their day-to-day business. And that's why it's up to us to continue to remind them through the letters to the editor, to talking to your family and friends, and for us to be doing the same thing. Because that's how we get that message out there. That's how we continue to remind people. And to try to hold Republicans accountable for their record. That's the only way that we're going to be able to do it, and to be able to make the change in the upcoming election.
As far as accountability, now he owes so much money.
He does.
Do the Democrats have any plan to force him to start paying back the taxpayers?
Well, he says that he's going to. but the governor has said a lot of things that he hasn't followed through on, or he's flip-flopped on. As one person said in Iowa, the governor's been on three sides of a two-sided issue. And, and just like he has said, well, I'm not going to go after right to work, and then he does. Just like in the Act 10 fight, he said, I'm not, civil service protections are going to be there. Now they're going after that. So you can't trust them by what they say. You have to look at their actions. And so we have a bill out there, which I don't think the Republicans, unfortunately, are going to pass, which would require him to pay back as well as to report to the Government Accountability Board the amount of money that taxpayers have spent on his behalf, as well as I think what he has spent in trying to gain national office. So I think that's one of the ways. But it's to continue to remind people. I just had, as a matter of fact, this guy is at the Hancock Parade every year. Every year I see him at the same spot. Every year he gives me a hard time for leaving the state, for going to Illinois during the Act 10 fight. And so I said, well, where has the Governor Walker been from the last number of months? Have you talked to Governor Walker about that? Because I figure, he's been there how many years now? He's giving me a hard time. So I've been pushing back. And he's like, well, he's balanced the budget. I'm like, no, he's not. We have a $500 million structural deficit. He hasn't balanced the budget. And then his wife elbowed him, and he was quiet and said, have a good day, and I moved on, shaking other people's hands. So the thing is that you've got to be able to push back on these people. And when your Republican friends, or independents or whoever, I'm not sure. I know union members, they're Republican, they're Democrats, and they're independents. But the fact is that the Republicans that we have in the Wisconsin legislature and Governor Walker, they're a different breed. They're not your father's Republican Party anymore. And that's why it's important to be able to hold them accountable, because they've gotten rid of their moderates. There's only a handful left in the state legislature, especially in the Senate. In the Assembly, it's overwhelming. They're hardcore conservatives. And, so it's kind of that death of common sense and willingness to reach across the aisle, to work together, to promote good public policy. What they're about is vindictiveness and getting back. And that's why you saw Governor Walker pull back some of his appointees once he found out that they had signed the recall petition. And with this new bill, when they're getting rid of the civil service, they're going to be going through and checking the recall petitions, because they've proven that they've done that in the past, and vetting you. And DOA, the Department of Administration, will be making all the hires for every other state agency. So you can bet that they're going to be checking to see what type of political involvement. And that's why, so many years ago, my husband actually brought home a cartoon from Harper's Magazine that talked about a business person. This was a scandal that originated in Wisconsin, when La Follette was governor, and he came in to clean it up. But talked about how much to buy a state representative, how much to buy a state senator, how much to buy a governor. And the sad fact is it seems like we're starting to see history repeated, and why we need to get back to really talking about what's good for democracy, what's good for the average person in Wisconsin, and not what's good for the political class in Madison, because that doesn't necessarily align. What's good for the common person is not what's necessarily good for the political class in Madison. And that's why they want to make all these rule changes. And the fact is, and this is a long answer to your question, but I don't know if you guys saw the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel article, editorial a few weeks back, where the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who endorsed Scott Walker and has endorsed a number of Republicans, came out and over this open records scandal. If you remember, they snuck in a provision to eliminate open records law provisions, to weaken them, the last day that the Joint Finance Committee was taking up the budget. That was right before, it was a Friday right before 4th of July weekend. I can tell you, I heard from a number of about that coming out, and they said, you need to stop that. The newspapers came out and editorialized against it. The Republicans were so embarrassed that they pulled it when the Senate when that bill came to the Senate floor. It was changed. Then just a few weeks later, through an open records request, the media found out that Robin Vos was again trying to get open records law in the state of Wisconsin. So what the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel did is they wrote this editorial calling for Robin Vos to be removed as Speaker, and then calling for him to be challenged in a primary as well as in the general election. And then they went on to tell people how they could go about doing that. I have never seen such an editorial by a major newspaper in the state of Wisconsin. And I think it goes to the point that, you know, they've just gone overboard and out of bounds. And that now it's time for the people to come back and start correcting where these guys want to go.
When the brother asked what the Dems could do, and really it's not up to the Dems. The minute we gave the Republican total control, we gave up our rights. And you saw that when the state Senate flipped. Now, hopefully there's no one in this room that has voted for Republicans, regardless how good they think they are, because Republicans stand for right to work, and that's what we got. So there are no good Republicans left. And I come from the Tom Tiffany, Mary Cesar area, where 5-6 years ago we had both Dems. So we're getting what we deserve.
Well, and I think the Republicans, too, have taken the opportunity to rewrite the rules. They've changed the districts to favor themselves when they did redistricting. Then they had their friends outside the legislature, the conservative groups, file lawsuits against the state of Wisconsin to get rid of some of our clean campaign finance laws. And then what they weren't able to achieve there, you see where bills have been introduced to make the other changes that they want. So what they've done is they've really stacked the deck so that it's really hard for Democratic and independent candidates to get elected in order to preserve their power. But the fact is that the pendulum always swings. There's always a swing. And I am hoping that in this next election that people are going to say, you know, I don't like the cuts that you've made to my public schools. I don't like the cuts that you've made to the university system. I don't like what you've done to working people. The fact is that their policies aren't working when it comes to job creation and economic growth. And there's this whole string, and you saw from the Marquette, the latest Marquette poll, I think it came out just a couple of weeks ago, where that message was starting finally to get through to people. And I think that is really important. That's why the Democrats and others are really need to make sure that people continue to be told about the Republican record. The fact is that the state is not going in the right direction. And all you have to do is look at Minnesota and see how well that state, under a Democratic governor with Mark Dayton, I mean, they have a $2 billion budget surplus, whereas Wisconsin had a $2.2 billion deficit. They're investing in their infrastructure. They're investing in their people. Wisconsin, we've gotten to the point where we're eating our seed corn. And you cannot build a thriving economy when you're going in that direction. And that's why when you look at all of the data that's coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and others, and just seeing what's happening with wages in Wisconsin, more people falling out of the middle class than any other state. I mean, that tells you that their policies aren't working. And that's why you've seen, too, bills introduced in the legislature that pit people against each other, because that's how they're hoping to distract folks from what's really going on in the state in terms of their economic record and other policies. So, but it is up to us to continue to pound away at that record. Yeah.
Julie, I'm from Tomahawk, and I'm just wondering if you've been sharpening up your log rolling skills to take on our prevailing.
Well, they redistricted me out of his district.
I was wondering if you were out now.
Yeah, I'm out of his district, and they actually put me into Congressman Kine's district. So yeah, that's what they can do, and they really look at packing the Democrats into safe Democratic districts, and then they've made really safe Republican districts for themselves. But the fact is that there is that swing, and I'm just hoping that people, based on what they've seen in the budget and what they're seeing now with, you know, Governor Walker's WEDA giving a $500,000 loan to a maxed out contributor where the DOA Secretary, Mike Kipsch, had pushed the agency not to give him a $500,000 loan, but to give him a $2.5 million loan. He made fraudulent statements on his application. They still gave him the money anyway. He was in trouble. And then they continued, the DOA Secretary continued to try to get more than the $500,000 from the agency, even after they knew that his agency was in trouble, his business was in trouble. They got a call from a luxury car dealership in Milwaukee saying, hey, so-and-so just told us, Bill Minahan just told us that he was getting a grant from the state so he could pay off his debt to me. So he didn't create any jobs. It just went to pay his debts. And he would have taken taxpayers for more if Paul Jaden wouldn't have said no. And then you had Ryan Murray, who was from the governor's office, who was put in as COO at WEDA, who was continuing to look for federal money as well as other taxpayer money for Bill Minahan, even after they knew his business was in the toilet and he was going down, and that money wasn't going to go to create any jobs here in the state of Wisconsin. That's the type of corruption that we've been talking about. And now you just had where land was sold to one of his big donors. It was state land that was sold to one of his donors. And the fact is that I think we're going to continue to see story after story, unfortunately, about this. And that's why we need to make a change. We need to make a change in Madison so that the Senate, the Democrats have a chance to win back the Senate in the next election. It's a presidential election, and despite all of the dark money that's going to be coming in from WMC, from the Americans for Prosperity and others, I think the issues and their record is on our side, but we have to be able to capitalize on it. That's why we need a good opponent for Tom Tiffany.
We have one?
Actually, we're talking to one. And we have a really good opponent who just came out against Rick Gudex. As you may recall, Rick Gudex told folks at the labor temple in his district that he would not vote for right to work. What did he do? He turned around and he voted for right to work. So now we have Mark Harris, who's running in that district, who he had run before for Congress, and I think he was beat by Grossman in a very conservative district. But in that portion of what is Gudex's district, he won. He won. So we have a good chance of taking out Rick Gudex in the next election. And we only have to pick up a few seats, and we will be in charge of the state Senate. So we'll be able to play defense on a number of these anti-worker bills that they want to continue to push through. And we're hoping to do that in a number of other seats as well. But we can only do that if we have the blood, sweat, tears, and help from the unions and other good people who are interested in taking back our government. So, yeah.
Julie, as you were talking about, you were on a parade, and one of the hecklers on the side of the parade stand. I was coming back from union school one time, and I was sitting aside of Mr. MTV, Real World, John Doe.
Oh, you're very lucky.
And that's when the Ryan budget was trying to be pushed to Capitol Hill. And he said something and sparked me off, which some days doesn't take much. I saw his YouTube video where he was whining about he owed $600,000 on this and his vacation property, and he was still paying for education. And I pretty much read him the riot act on the aircraft. We were tied with a seat aside, you ain't gonna move. The brother sitting in the back of the room, we went to one of the town hall meetings, I guess you can care to call it, and once again, Mr. Real World MTV star was up. He was the main attraction. And it was amazing how people were asking questions to put him on point, keep him on point. Well, wouldn't answer the question. But it's amazing, like you say, you see the same gentleman at these parades every time. Every time Mr. Real World sees me, he kind of goes the other direction. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if we crawl deep enough in their ass, They don't forget.
They don't. I know exactly where this gentleman sits along that parade route every year. The thing is he's not from my district either and stuff. So I think he feels free to give me a hard time. But I feel free to give it back to him with the facts. And I think that's what you have to do.
Yep, you know, we gotta hold them accountable, and like I said.
So there's a polite way to be able to do it because you don't want the rest of the crowd to kind of turn against
Oh,
you.
no, oh, no.
So, but there's a good way to be able to get across your point and still be respectful. And I think that's what's key because that's how you get the crowd on your side. And they're able to see through the flim-flam that they're putting out there.
But like I said, we gotta hold their feet to the fire.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So wonderful. Well, seeing no more questions, I hope that you guys have a, yes?
I have something that maybe you can use. Walker guy went into power promising hundreds of thousands of jobs to all of us out here and stuff.
Mhm.
But right now, over in the state of Iowa, 90 of his best buddies are looking for jobs.
I know. Well, I like how he says he's not interested in a cabinet position, but we also know that that might not be offered, so I think he's just covering himself. So, but thanks so much for all the work that you do. I hope that you'll go out there and continue to fight because it's not that long until the 2016 elections, and we can really have an impact. And I know we can do that with the work that you guys are doing and then others all across the state. It's really important. And we know what's at stake. We've seen what happens when you get the Republicans at every level of government, even within the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So it's important, and the fight goes on. Thanks so much.